the bulimia situation did become a little bit more ignited during that time because I was in the spotlight. I was on TV. And then move forward a little bit towards when I met Kyle. I was still doing that. We started dating. I moved in with him. And for even the first year and a half of us being together, he had no clue that I would do that. And
Sneaking away to the restroom.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. Tosh, hi.
Hi, Nathan. Dr. Uncle Nathan Riley.
Dr. Uncle Nathan Riley. For those out there who don't know, Tosh and I have become very good friends. I mean, so much so that I've spent a week plus in your house and have been like co-parenting with you during times when Kyle's away and I'm trying to get work done. And something that I wanted to share with you, Tosh, is of course I was thinking about you last night because I was thinking about the interview, and I had some of your chocolate mousse, your keto mousse, and I wish there was a way for people to try this because you have given me the recipe and I have sworn to secrecy. It's like there's a covenant, and but given what we're going to be talking about today, there is no lack of richness in your household from an eating standpoint, and so if there was a way for somebody to try your mousse, given that they can't really make it themselves, like maybe they'll just have to come over here sometime to Kentucky and try it. But I was eating that and I was like, gosh, we're going to be talking about eating disorders. And I don't know if anybody could really fully appreciate how delicious your household is. I mean, you're also an amazing cook, so I'll give you
Thank
kudos
you.
where it's due. But there is so much richness in the type of food you make and whatnot. So let's get into some eating disorder stuff. But I wanted to preface this with like, this is not a conversation around necessarily restricting, not indulging. I mean, there's so much indulgence in each of our lives, and we are both simultaneously very thoughtful about body dysmorphia. I've experienced that myself, and I know that you've told me your story. So let's start there. Maybe first off, if for people who don't know you, what do they need to know about Tosh Kingsbury?
God, if they have listened to your podcast for a long time, they probably already heard me talk about me.
You're
I
also in the
am.
intro. Your voice is one of the intro voices in the Welcome to the Holistic
Oh
OBGYN podcast.
yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
I'm like at the end or something.
Yeah.
Nathan
Yeah.
Riley podcast.
Yeah.
I had to
Save the best
practice. I
for
had to
last.
la ma 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 get my voice. So I am married to Kyle Kingsbury, which anyone that loves podcasting and in this community tend to know him. I am the one that holds down the fort here with the kiddos. I'm a mom of two. Um, I am an artist. I am a homeschooling, unschooling mom. So that really is all consuming of my life right now. I have a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old. Two
And
very
they are a
big.
lot. Big
There
personalities.
is a big age, like there's a first changes that happen at 2, and then there's like another big shift at
Yeah.
7. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, we didn't even plan this out, but man, we've got 2 really big shifts happening at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's, that's my life right now, and I love it. And I don't, I can fantasize about having all the time in the world to do the things I want, but I'm also loving that I get to have this time with them.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really know what else to say about myself to
You're a
introduce
dynamo.
myself.
You're a dynamo. What I'll do is I'll pop up a picture of some of the art that you've made. You made a piece of art for our friend Paul Check, and like you are a really, really, really talented artist. I don't think,
Thank you.
I think that might even be something that you're like a new title that you're maybe having to wear, but it goes without saying that when you see what you're able to put onto a canvas, it's like, what? Like, how did you do that?
Oh,
So
you were
you've
here
got
while I was working on that. I was
yeah,
working
very
on that,
early
right?
on. Yeah,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
were working on the dolphins when I was there and some of the
Okay.
landscaping. But man, to be able to paint skin, human flesh, and all these animals and make water look, give it texture and everything, like you really do have a wide range of talents. Um, so if we've talked about your cooking, you're an incredible parent. You're this like history of super athletic And I would say you probably still are, but you've gone through so many life changes. Why don't we start in telling the story of your relationship with food and exercise and, you know,
Kind of the
body
origin story of the
body
eating
image?
disorder, how
Yeah,
that
let's
came
start
about.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, I grew up on a farm and I grew up pretty poor. We didn't do sports and things like that when we were young. We were also homeschooled, but there were a lot of us and we had the farm. So we were always outside, always active kids. My mom was always really mindful about like what we ate, but it was still poor food. It wasn't organic. It was, Crisco and margarine and, she just didn't know.
Where was your hometown?
Oh, Las Vegas, Nevada. So
Oh,
we
in
were like
Vegas.
outskirts of town. It wasn't like, middle of the city farm. Um, Most of my childhood, well, from like age 1 to 9, we were in the inner city part. And then we moved when my mom remarried. So, yeah, my mom was a runner. So I remember her waking up and going running. And then I was best friends with my mom's best friend's daughter. And they had gone to like high school and all these things together. And I remember as I grew up, her mom and dad, like my mom went to homecoming with her uncle and her mom went to prom, with my dad. It was just a bunch of church kids that were all friends. But I remember her parents telling me like that how great of a runner my mom was, that she was like the best in Nevada and she was one of the first women to hold like a cross country state
Oh, I didn't know
championship
that. That's
title.
interesting.
Yeah. And so there was this like, wow, mom's an amazing runner. And I had such a desire to um, connect with my mom. Like she was a great mom, but she had a lot of children and a lot of responsibilities. And, knowing what I know now as a mom, I can be like, oh, yeah, it makes sense that all of us probably felt unloved because we all had different love languages. And that's a lot of people that you have to, in order to raise a child, you
Yeah.
got to make sure they're full in all the love languages. And she did her best. But I wanted to, and I also had heard that my real dad had killed himself. We had talked about this
Yeah.
when I was about 2 years old. And they also knew my dad. And so they would always, oh, your dad was, really fast. He was like a sprinter and he was super athletic. And
Phew.
so I just had these, stories of my parents being great athletes. And I had two older sisters who went to public high school before me and they tried like all the different things. Oh, I want to be a tennis player. I want to do track, but they never like stuck with anything.
Mm.
But around 8th grade, I would start to ask my mom if I could go run with her in the mornings. And I remember being like a mile in and being like, I can't go any further. This is too far. I can't
I
do
saw
it.
this.
But
I just saw this video on TikTok of a little girl running her first mile, and the parents were there cheering her on. It was like a mile run amongst a bunch of like 7 and under kids, and she
oh
was
my
like,
gosh.
she ran past and was like, "I hate this. I hate this," and they were like, "You're doing great, baby."
That's a long way for a kid. A mile is
Oh
a
my
lot.
gosh, that's a lot of
That's a
running.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Wow.
And so then like I kept doing it and really loved it and really wanted to race. I wanted to be like my mom. And so I decided to go to public high school as well. Basically, mostly for the reason of running. I wanted to be on a team and I really didn't care about like the social part
Yeah.
of school at all. Um, and so went to high school, joined the team, did horrible in my first year. I remember getting lapped at state
Oh my
on
gosh,
the track,
really?
lapped
You're
by
like,
the
why am
first,
I? Why
but
don't I just
but it was
stop?
like stars in my eyes as I'm being lapped. Like, oh my gosh, like she's amazing. And that was my uh, first time seeing an anorexic person. Like she was very, very like so skinny. And
Mm.
I've always been like very athletic build. I've always had a big old booty even when I was in high school. Like I just like boys would come and I was so Christian and like, oh, like embarrassed if guys were like, damn, you got a big booty. And I'd be like, oh, I hate my big
you,
butt,
you you
like
had
it's
all the
like the
muscles in the
sin.
right place.
And now I'm like, yes. Thank you, God.
Thank you
Butts
for
are
my
in.
delicious big booty.
um, but it kind of ignited this thing in me because I really wanted to be a great runner, and all the girls that were, the top athletes were really thin. And so it didn't start then, but there was like a little seed that was planted. And I got better and better each season, cross country track. But I just wasn't quite there. And
Mm,
I was still being beat by all the really thin, thin, thin girls. And then meanwhile at home, there was a lot of chaos and, like having lost my dad to suicide. And then my first stepdad sexually abused us, or
mm.
me. I can't speak for my sisters, but me from age like 4 to 9.
Oh my
So there was
Lord.
like all that stuff that was kind of dealt with. Like I remember going to counseling and things. I hated it. So my mom didn't continue to make us go, but I wasn't acting out. I wasn't doing anything that was like, oh, you need therapy. Like I was very happy, and I was very like, even my best friends at that time will say like, I never knew that that had happened. Like you never would have
Mm,
guessed. Um, but knowing what I know now, all of this stuff was coming up with stuff that wasn't dealt with.
yeah.
And then my mom, obviously, when that dad went to jail, she remarried again. And then that stepdad brought in a lot of chaos and just tension in the home. He was
Mm,
really angry, would break things and slam doors and leave, and always yelling at my mom. And so there was this whole new aspect. But I also still was like, I want a relationship with you. I want a dad. And, so there was like all this stuff. And then when my mom decided to divorce him when I was 16, um, and then was already starting to talk to my personal trainer that she had. Just airing my mom's dirty laundry,
mhm.
but I love my mom, and I get it.
Yeah.
But she had hired a personal trainer for me my junior year because I was doing well, and I really wanted to get a scholarship, and that was the only way I was going to go to college. But then she divorced my stepdad, and I saw something that seemed a little too romantic between her and my personal trainer. And I was just angry. I just became super angry,
How old were you then?
and like 16.
16. Okay.
Yeah. And so I just dove headfirst into my running and my studies, and it just became everything to me. And waking up in the morning before school starts, and being on my stationary bike, riding, getting in miles, and reading my book while I'm getting in all these miles. And then
Mm,
the food restriction, then I started being like, I can't eat that food that she would make, and it was like, I'm going to eat soy cheese and
yeah.
more vegetables, and
Sure.
no sugar. And there were a lot of really healthy things that I had decided, like cutting sugar was a great thing.
Yeah.
But soy cheese, not so good.
Were you like kind
Um,
of fat? You and I are almost exactly the same age. Were you also, I mean, I remember when I was 16, 17, it was like fat free as well. Like
uh-huh.
you'd get fat free cheese or fat
Yep.
free, the lean meats,
Mhm.
even if they were cold
I
cut,
can't
crappy
believe it's
deli
not
meat.
butter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was it very quickly spiraled, and then I was doing really well, but then I went to a championship race in California, and again the girl that won was just bone skinny. And I remember, I'll never forget walking after finishing that race, and I was walking for like a cool down crying because I was so disappointed in myself and how I had raced and wanting to do really good. And I remember, I'll never forget it. It was kind of cold, wet, and I was just in my head like, I'm not freaking eating anymore. I'm not eating anymore. Like I
Mm.
have to lose weight. I have to, so it literally started. I remember when it started, and when the next day came, and it was like just crazy amounts of food restriction. I still ate, but you can't call that eating when you're training as much as I was.
Yeah.
Um, I would pour like a fourth of a cup of grape nuts in a bowl and have soy milk and a little bit of honey, and I would eat that for breakfast. And then I would not allow myself to eat again until like fifth period. And I would have like a little bagel with a little bit of peanut butter and jelly.
Wow.
And then I would go to training, go to practice, eat an apple, and then maybe eat dinner. And if
Right.
I ate
Right.
dinner, it was like the tiniest amount. And naturally, my mom noticed. And then she actually had shared stories about herself as a 16-year-old who had anorexia. And so she was like, I know what's happening here. And instead of me being like, oh, mom, like we're having this bonding moment, it just was like a fuck you. You can't control this. I'm in
Mm.
charge of this because I was so mad at her for all the reasons that I had at the time. Um,
Mm.
and I think I was like 91, 92 pounds at like 5 feet, which it wasn't like bone, like you see some women and they're like bone skinny. Um, I was, it was really miserable. Like I see pictures. I didn't throw anything away. I kept all the pictures that I have of that time because it's a great
Mm. Mm-hmm.
reminder. It was a
Mm.
huge, experience, life lesson, and stuff that I'm really proud and really like all the things I've experienced in my life. This is just another thing that I have the opportunity to share with other people, and I've had experience with it. I know what it
Yeah.
feels like to, if you feel that pain of hunger, that's a good thing. It's a
Yeah.
good thing if you can't sleep at night because you're so hungry. And, if you eat a tiny little bit amount, tiny little bit of food and you step on the scale and it didn't go up at all, you're like, okay, that was the right amount. But if
Oh.
it did go up at all, it's like, oh my gosh, and you don't eat for however long. It's miserable. It is a
Well,
miserable way to be.
I imagine, given that sparkle that you described when you watched this other young lady blow by you on the track and lap you. I used to be, I was like into Ironman distance triathlon and whatnot. When somebody passes you, there is no greater incentive. You can do anything when you know that you can catch that person if you just make these changes. It can be such an incredible motivator for people like me and you. And after you made those changes, you also then saw a reciprocal improvement in your sport, right? So
Mhm.
it was like this positive feedback loop that you were getting from your performance, despite whatever other incentives you might have now to take care of
Mhm.
yourself. So what was like the height of your running career in high school, and then how did that translate into college?
So, anorexia was the thing my junior year, and I tanked at
Mm,
state. I did horrible, and it was like, this is not working for me. Like, this is not, I cannot run. I was emotional all the time, always crying, always miserable. It was just miserable.
mm,
And so I finally was open to seeing a counselor about it, and trying to get healthy. So that summer, I had started eating normally again. I didn't go crazy, but I started eating in a healthy manner, healthy amount. Um, and then was able to train like a rock star that summer before my senior year. And then I was like undefeated my senior year in whether I traveled to California, like I did amazing. Just my body was like, oh, food, like we can do this. And
your
um,
posterior chain was like brrrr, like in
uh-huh.
Mario when you eat the mushroom.
Yeah. But there were still a lot of, it was still there. It was still very alive. From the feeling miserable if I ate too much or just, looking in the mirror because you're so used to seeing yourself super skinny. So, like, the body dysmorphia was very much still there, but my performance was where I wanted it to be. So it was like, so I ended up
Mm.
getting a full ride, running an academic scholarship to Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff. I love Flagstaff.
That's like
And so
Flagstaff is where like every single triathlete that I ever knew, if they wanted to level up, they went to Flagstaff, and
a
they
lot of
were
Olympians train there. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
big training facilities and whatnot. Yeah,
Big training.
yeah.
Yep. High altitude. It is.
Mm.
And then, it's got all four seasons, but it's nothing like not crazy hot summers and not freezing cold winters. You get snow, but it
Train
was
year
really
round.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
This little mountain oasis in the middle of Arizona. So get to college, and I had still stayed in touch with my third dad, my second stepdad, the angry one. Uh, and just because he had been my dad kind of for like 9 years, he was our dad in the house. Um, and I get to school, and you have, these teammates who are, a lot of runners, they'll just eat everything because
Mm.
they've,
Mhm.
they can eat everything, train well, run well, do all these things. But I had it wasn't long ago that I'd been so restrictive of my diet, and then was still, restrictive, but not to the point, like, I was healthy, but there was still eating issues there. And so I have this team that we would all go out and eat together at the cafeteria, and it, I just started eating what everybody else was eating, and very was adding on those freshman, 15s.
Mm.
Um, and I remember getting injured, not like a huge injury, but just like a little injury to where I had to like take time off and just do like pool workouts, which a lot of people love pool workouts. I hate pool workouts. I don't like them at all. I want to run. I just want to
Yeah,
run.
yeah.
And not on a treadmill either. Those, I can't
Not
do
slow
treadmills.
motion in a
Oh my
6 foot
gosh.
pool.
I'm like, put me on a trail, I'm gone for like hours. Put me on a treadmill, I'm like, I'm out after like half a mile. Like, I can't do this.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Um, so I get injured, I'm eating crappy food, and I go back to Vegas to visit my family, and I see my stepdad, and he was like super thin and lost all this weight, and I was like, "Whoa, what are you like, are you you've been working out? Like, how did you lose all this weight?" And he's like, "Oh, I sometimes if I overeat, I just make myself puke up some of it, and then I'm good,
No
and I have
way.
managed to keep my weight." It was like advertisement for bulimia, like, from my stepdad. And I remember thinking, "Oh gosh, that's not what I'm into at all. Like, I'm not into that." But seed planted.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so I go back to school, and I remember coming home after gorging myself of all this nonsense food, and just feeling that like shame and, hatred for myself.
Mm.
And that thought popped in my head, well, I could try that, like, just a little bit at least, and then I could maintain, and I won't do it all the time. You go through all the things, and this is, I'll only do it this one time, and then I'll be better tomorrow. I won't overeat tomorrow. Um, and so I remember going in the bathroom, and it was really hard to do at first, like your body's so resistant to it. You're like, no. And then there's a poster in the stall that's like suffering from bulimia. And it was like this whole, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not bulimic. I am just this one time, I'm going to try this. And so I did. And it was like this instant euphoria, this instant feeling of like, oh, it's gone. All that food is
Wow.
out,
Yeah,
like, it
yeah,
felt so good. And, uh, but I still was like, I'm not going to be that person. I'm not, I'm just going to be better about my eating. But then you go to a party or you do something, and because of my unhealthy relationship with
yeah.
food, it was like, and then it just, I couldn't not overeat. And then it also became, Well, I can overeat because I can just
Vomit it
throw
up.
it up later. So I can really just eat whatever I want, shame, guilt free,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then get rid of it. I puke it up.
Can we pause just for a second,
Yes.
Tosh? You use the word euphoria, which is a really powerful uh, sort of personal experience. You know, euphoria, ecstasy. I mean, these are the types of places that many of us very hedonistically are constantly chasing that. So to say that having regurgitated some food was euphoric tells me that
Mhm.
there is a very, very powerful experience for a person here. I know that I'm sounding like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. But when people think and don't have a connection with bulimia, they're like, how could a person do that? You are saying it was a euphoric experience, despite the maybe unpleasant, like logistical nature and maybe even the
Right.
taste. There was a euphoria that, I've gotten some of that out of my system. And that in and of itself must have become sort of like a hardwired tendency to do it because now you're also experiencing a euphoria. It's not just, I hope I look good in the mirror later. Immediately
Mhm.
afterwards, you actually get a little bit of a high. Is that
Mhm.
is that right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. I never really thought
Yeah.
of that.
Not necessarily from like puking itself, but more
Right.
just the instant
Right.
really like relief. It's like the shame because you feel so much shame and
Yeah.
self-hatred and loathing and disappointment and disgust and all the things you feel from overeating when you have an eating
Yeah.
disorder.
Yeah.
And because Kyle overeats and he feels, when he overeats, he doesn't feel remorse at all.
He also takes
He's just like,
15
oh.
seconds to eat 1,500 calories. I've seen the guy eat. It's like, where does your food go?
Yeah, he's just like inhaling it. Bear eats like him too, and I'm like, no, no, we're gonna slow down. Don't eat like your father.
We love you,
Um,
Kyle. We love you. We
he's
mean no
gotten better.
harm.
He's gotten better because I'm constantly like, can you slow down like a little bit? Um, we haven't even gone around and said our highs and lows of the day. Like you're
Right.
just
Bear's
done
in the middle of his
washing dishes.
blessing. Yeah.
um, so yeah, because it's all those things you feel, those are gone. And then you're like, your stomach isn't protruding. It's just like the euphoria is from the release of the thing that makes you feel shame, overeating
Yeah.
and all that. But it becomes addicting and it became uh the thing that I just knew. Like it got so bad, Nathan, that I was doing that after every meal at one point.
Hmm.
Um, and when it gets to that level, if I go and I overeat because I'm like, I'm just gonna go puke it up, but then kind of plans change or someone shows up and they're like, hey, how's it going? And you're like, damn it. Like now I'm stuck here talking to you. I can't sneak off and be like, blah, like in the bathroom. Like if you get stuck in a situation where if I got stuck in a situation where I wasn't able to in a certain amount of time after, and you're just like, oh my gosh, my body is now like digesting this and it's like taking in all the fat and the
Yeah.
sugar, and you just like in your head. And then you're just an angry, I would be super angry and sad and depressed and all that, like it was a vicious
Hmm.
few years like that where it was almost every meal if I could. Um,
Mm.
my running sucked in college. There was also I was actually just talking about this with Leah the other day,
Yeah.
how in college, so I was there, I left, I quit my junior year. My running never improved. I was just like the bulimia literally just took over my life and my energy, and I couldn't perform well. We had a coach change, so the coach I went for left and a new coach came in. But I had, it was like the first time that I was having like flashbacks of the molestation that had happened as a child
Oh.
because I would sit at tables and be hanging out with teammates. And I was like the virgin, good little Christian girl who was incredibly naive and knew nothing about anything. And they loved it because they would just like crack jokes or like, do you even know what that is or what that means? And a lot of stuff I didn't know
Mm.
because I wasn't even allowed to sit in at sex ed in high
Mm.
school. Not that I missed really, anything. So it's probably better this way. um, but uh, then they would proceed to like tell me about things. And then it was like bringing up
Oh my gosh.
memories from the abuse that I had gone through where it was like, oh, that's what that was. So I was having all of these things coming up from my abuse and I was doing the bulimia thing. I wasn't performing and I was the runner. I was known as the runner. So anytime I'd visit home or anything and people like, oh, how's the running? And it was like just this
Yeah.
constant, that was where my worth,
Mm.
was
Mm.
resting, was with me performing as a runner.
Mm.
Um, and then somebody very close to me died, like a father figure, man in my life that was like huge actually in the shift of my mind. He was a big part of um, kind of cutting the cord with my mom, not like he didn't never said that, but just kind of bringing in other perspectives that were not hers.
Mm.
Just a lot more open minded. And he was not a Christian. Um, but he was a very kind person and he was a very good person. And then there was also two teammates I had, Chris and Johanna, who I hung out with all the time. And same thing, like not Christian. She was like, I don't believe in anything. And, but they were such good people. And I remember thinking like, I don't, I don't see God like them going to hell because I believed in heaven and hell and all that. But I'm like, I can't believe that God would send these people
Yeah.
to hell just because they don't believe in him. Like these are good, kind people. So he died. And so there was all these things. And then I got in a horrible car accident and rolled my car. I fell asleep driving, rolled my car, and had a horrible concussion. And I didn't know anything about concussions. No one, like, even, I didn't go to the hospital or anything. But knowing what I know now, I'm probably going to be saying that a lot in this podcast. But I I spiraled basically.
Mm.
That's when I decided I'm not doing this anymore. I don't want to run anymore. I don't even want to do school. I don't know what I'm going to school for. I wanted to for art. And my mom convinced me not to because she's like, you'll never make money. This is a huge opportunity. You have school paid for. Be a nurse, do forestry, be a teacher, like, and so I was like, okay, and trying all
Mm.
these things, but nothing. I didn't want to do any of those things. And um, all the while, all through all this, the bulimia is still going. And so I left and went and did like a missionary program up in Mammoth, California for a year. Wasn't vibing with their style. Like I liked doing the like helping people, like we helped at
Yeah.
Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, cool.
But so then I left there and then I went and lived in Hawaii for a year with my sister. And through all of this, nobody knew that I was struggling with bulimia.
Mm.
I hid it very well. Um, I
Mm.
wanted to not do it anymore. I just didn't know how. But I also didn't
Yeah.
want, because it's like I knew if I told somebody that I had an issue, that I had a problem, that I was bulimic, that then the possibility of the opportunity to puke if I felt like I wanted to, then I would be like, someone's going to be listening
Scrutinized.
by the
Yeah.
door.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
someone's going to know what I'm doing, and I didn't, so I wasn't quite ready for that kind of accountability because
Mm.
in reality, I didn't want to stop.
Yeah.
Um, and flash forward, was modeling, was doing all the things, was the ring girl for UFC, all that, met Kyle.
Well, actually,
And
around the time when you were modeling, you're a UFC ring girl. You're around all these athletes, these incredible athletes like Mr. Kingsbury himself, who were cutting weight. There's a degree of body dysmorphia and this sort of, I don't know, obsession, not just with physique, but with performance based on calories in, calories out. I mean, it was really twisted. I remember, I had a lot of family members who were wrestlers. One kid was like a multi-time national champion. And I remember he just had this incredible obsession with not eating when he was
Mhm.
getting close to his fights and whatnot. So
Mhm.
let's talk about that period of time. And I also want to acknowledge, if you're modeling, if you guys don't know what Tosh looks like, go to Living with the Kingsburys and you'll see she has this incredible head of hair. You've got incredible teeth. Your skin is perfect. Did any of those little things change while you were growing up through high school, into college, into your 20s? Did you notice some of those things changing as well, not just the midline,
Yeah,
the
big time.
waist?
So in high school, I was 5 feet. And then when I left college, I was still 5 feet. That makes sense, right?
I was 4'6". It was a really weird thing.
But I didn't run for like 4 years. I didn't run. Um, and basically didn't really work out at all. Uh, I was just trying. I remember living in Hawaii was like the first time I kind of started doing some like personal healing work. Like I wrote the
Mm,
letter out to my each father, writing like what I would, would say.
yeah.
But it's very healing to say all of those things, to be angry, to whatever. And I remember in that, after like not running for that long, I was having some kind of, when we were traveling for Hurricane Katrina, we had to go get like a physical done. And she's like, "Oh, you're 5'2.5". I was like, 5'2.5". Like I grew after like
Whoa.
in my early 20s, I grew 2.5 inches. So I also was like a full figured girl. Like I had natural D's, which I don't have anymore. Breastfeeding.
Thanks, babies.
I actually prefer smaller. I like to be a part of the itty bitty titty committee. I prefer it because I'm just more. I can do yoga and run and not have to
Yeah,
like hold
yeah.
myself. But anyways,
My
um,
wife still has D's. I think they're probably bigger than D's, but she was like a 32D her whole life, and she,
mm.
like, every time she sees a dress on a mannequin or whatever, she's like, oh, like if only I didn't have these perfect breasts. But the
I
grass is
know.
the grass is
I'm not
always
mad.
greener.
Hey, I really enjoyed those D's. Like they were great. I was also very unhealthy. So like in my modeling years, I did, I was billboard model, I was a go-go dancer and um calendars, I did all sorts of stuff. And through all of that, I at that point I was not every meal, but it was anytime I overate, I would do it.
Mm, mm-hmm,
So it was
mm-hmm.
still often.
Yeah,
Um, but I did start working out again at that time. So there was also that like when you exercise, there's just this natural inclination to like want to eat healthier
yeah,
and not
yeah.
eat junk food
That's
and
so true.
candy.
Start with
Um,
exercise, everybody. If you're going to start anywhere, sleep and exercise, and everything else will fall into place because you'll want
yeah,
to do these other
you want
things.
to
Yeah,
because you're
yeah,
already doing the hardest thing, which
yeah.
is exercising.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just started developing, and that's a big part of why I ended up getting a lot of started modeling and was even approached to model, was because I did have a a woman's beautiful, sexy body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I remember when I was working at the Playboy Club, and I was just a hostess bunny, and my job was just to walk around and like and schmooze with the guests and talk and sit at the VIP tables and make sure they're having fun. Oh, we're talking, and I'm really good at that. I like talking to people, so
Yeah, you
it
are.
was not a hard job.
You're very charming.
Um, thank you. But I remember there was this group of guys that came in, and I went over and I was talking to them like, "Oh, where are you guys from?" They're like, "Oh, we're actually from here." And I'm like, "Oh," like they were like my age. I'm like, "Oh, high school." They're like, "Such and such high school." And one's like, "Oh, Cimarron." I was like, "I went to Cimarron." Like, "What year did you graduate?" He's like, 2003. I'm like, "Me too." And he's like, "Wait, what's your name?" And I was like, "Natasha Wicks." And he's like, "No, the runner?" And because I was like always on the announcements because I was doing so great and running in high school. Um, and we were like joking about something. He was like, "Man, I feel stupid that I never hit on you in high school." I'm like, "Well, I looked very different, very skinny runner, never wore makeup, just sweatsuits and all that." But
Yeah.
so that's just a little example of like my blossoming
Yeah.
into my womanly body, which was still very hard though. There were
Sure.
still times that I was like, because in that industry, it is very um, all about your body and, how small is your waist and your legs. And at that time, it was more popular to be on the skinny side still, not anorexic skinny, but not a big butt.
Strong was
And
not sexy necessarily
no,
then.
no,
How old were you? Late 20s, you said?
like 26,
Oh, okay.
25,
Still pretty young.
26,
Yeah.
probably 25 actually. Yeah. And being around the athletes when I was working for the UFC, that was not that really wasn't a thing that crossed my mind. I was already like running a lot more at that point and feeling fit and strong myself. Um, and but there was that feeling like the bulimia situation did um, become a little bit more ignited during that time because I was in the spotlight. I was on TV.
Yeah.
When you're walking around the ring, those lights are very unforgiving. You any little dimple, anything, just it shows.
Yeah.
Um, so it became a little bit inflamed. The
Mm.
bulimia became
Mm-hmm.
inflamed in that time. And then move forward a little bit towards when I met Kyle. I was still doing that. We started dating. I moved in with him, and for even the first year and a half of us being together, he had no clue that I would do that. And
Sneaking away to the restroom.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I did ayahuasca, and I remember in my ceremony, it was a very clear, like it was like, "Oh, I don't want to do this anymore. Like like take it, remove it from me. Like
Mm.
just I want to wake up and it not be an issue, not have to think about it. It'll never be something and the very strong message was like, you have to tell him. You have to tell him. You
Mm.
have to have somebody who can help keep you accountable and telling somebody, acknowledging the thing, the disgusting, shameful thing. To me it was like whatever, it's not, disgusting but like sharing that with somebody was like, I'm disgusting. I
Mm.
puke my food up. I overeat because I remember
Mm.
him always being like, "Damn, you can you can eat a lot." And I'm like and I just was like, "Yeah, I'm a runner," like I just like passed it off as
Yeah.
whatever.
Oh, and you'd
Um,
become so adept at this as well. Like it wasn't like
yeah.
somebody might be discovering. You just brush it off and keep going about. Tosh,
Mhm.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. I was really good at hiding it, and I had it down so fast to where it wasn't this long process in the bathroom. It was my body just knew exactly what to do. Um,
Wow.
and I am so happy that my teeth are still healthy because that's like, what, 9 years?
9 years of bulimia.
9 years of bulimia. And for a
Wow.
while there, it was like every meal. So, I mean, I was always like, "Argh," like brushing my teeth like crazy, and I would floss
Yeah.
after, every brush. So, like, I was really big on that. I never like had hair thinning. But it was all emotional. It was the emotional roller coaster of it, the shame, the laying in bed at night and just being like,
Mm.
tomorrow I'll do better, or thinking back at the food that I ate if I didn't puke. And, because the anorexia would kind of creep in there sometimes too, where it was like,
Mhm.
I don't want to be bulimic anymore, so I'm just going to restrict my food intake. And so they would just kind of coincide with each other. But then when I finally told Kyle, and bless his heart, and I mean, that man, like,
Yeah.
I can tell him anything and I've told him everything, but anytime I've told him something that I felt shame about, he's always been the most loving, supportive. And in that situation, he was like, "Huh? What do you mean?" Like, he was just like, "How is that po" He's like, "I feel like, am I not an aware person?" I'm like, "No, I'm just really good at hiding it." Um,
How did he support you? Because I wonder if people out there listening, might be thoughtful about that. Like, what is my partner going to say? And if there is somebody out there who is supporting, and I also want to emphasize, I think a lot of men out there have eating disorders as well. It's the people that are constantly looking in the mirror, showing off their abs, and doing something in order to get more ripped. It's a different,
mhm,
perhaps a different type of body dysmorphia, but there are people out there that are really, this is a very personal thing. So if a
mhm.
person listening, if they do suspect that their partner's, going through something like this and that conversation does arise, are you able to share maybe a little bit of what was magic about Kyle's special sauce that made it feel so supported?
Yeah, so he for me, it was more, he was like, how do I support you in this? Like, if you are going to the bathroom, do I need to like check on like, or do you need me to come in with you? Like, what is it that you need from me? And um for me, my request was just like, I need help with portion control because I don't want to not eat, but I want to, like, if I just need help with stopping when
Yeah.
I'm eating. Like,
Yeah.
um but mostly for me it was just the telling him, the that was like a huge breaking point
Yeah.
of that whole thing. And then it took a little while to really feel um healed from that, but it really came down to just changing my thoughts around food, changing my thoughts around why I'm eating, like really going in with intention every time
Yeah.
I ate and saying, is this what my body needs or is this what my body wants? I also read How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. That was one of the
Hmm.
things that he gave me. And reading that was huge for me in just kind of breaking food down,
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
eating and the importance of it, and just in a way that I'd never um, read before. And because of where I was at in wanting to heal and change, it was what I needed. So there would still be the times that I would lay in bed and, go back through, oh, what did I eat today? I'm going to not eat tomorrow. Like, it's just anytime you have emotional stuff or
Yeah.
when life is
Yeah.
handing you hard things, that tended to be the thing that I would kind of turn to, was the control. It was
Mm.
all like typically with eating disorders. And that's when people think eating disorder, they tend to think anorexia or bulimia, but there's such a range, like what you were saying. It doesn't necessarily, you can see a healthy person who looks healthy, but like, what's that person's relationship with food? Is it completely restrictive? Because I see that too. I know different people that have had eating disorders and they are super restrictive. They eat a very certain way. And to me, this is my own opinion, to me, that's still a form of eating disorder.
Right.
If you have to completely restrict yourself from all these things all the time, or if let yourself have a little bit of meat, then you're just going
Yeah.
to fall off the wagon. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right.
there's the how do you look at yourself in the mirror? Like, when you eat food, do you hate your body? Do you need to cover your body when your stomach's a little distended? Because
Yeah.
when you're a lean person, typically after you eat, your stomach is going to be a little protruded.
Yeah.
Like, you just
Right.
ate some food. And
Right.
that used to freak me out. And now it's like my relationship with food is like what I'd always wanted it to be. I got there, but it took a lot of work. It took a lot of intentional focus on my food when I'm eating, what I'm eating. And it did take also a period of time where I just completely removed sugar, and things that obviously those aren't bad things to remove. But I wouldn't even leave space for like a special occasion. It was like,
Yeah.
I just need to completely remove this until I can come at it in a healthy place. And now I'm in a place where I literally, well, right now I'm doing a cleanse for the first time in like 4 years with Kyle. We just removed sugar and
Yeah.
like most carbs and dairy, um, just because we haven't done like a
Yeah.
parasite candida type cleanse in a while. Um, but it's the need for instant, what's the word I'm looking for? Gratification
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to bulimia, or the feeling of starvation, like it's a control thing. So it's looking back at when it started for me, there was so much chaos in my home. There was so much that was
Yeah.
out of my control. And even though the running and the things were kind of the things that kickstarted it, the continuing with it was completely a control. This is something that nobody else can control over me. This is what I can do and no one can stop me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then the
Yeah.
bulimia, it's very similar to the same thing. Even though it's like completely out of control, there is still an a um aspect of control that comes with it. I can eat whatever I want, but I can also still control what stays in my body and what doesn't stay in my body. It's a very warped
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. I think we oftentimes people turn to the cult of medicine to help them solve these problems, and the cult of medicine tells you eat less, exercise more. That's like the extent of their lifestyle modification advice. But I've been where you've been, where even when Stephanie, my wife now, we met when we were 16. We separated when I went to medical school. We were in very, very different places, and we came back together after that. And during that time, when I was initially coping with um, not having this emotional crutch in my life, which is exactly what she was, that was the reason that we needed to be apart. I didn't want to feel the pain or the chaos of what that felt when I was laying down at night. So what did I do? I started running, biking, and swimming and lifting weights as hard as I possibly could because I could
Mm,
control that pain. I could control my breathing rate. I could control how fast I was going to go in the pool or on the bike or whatever else. What I didn't seem to felt like I have, what I didn't feel like I had control over was the emotional duress, this turmoil that was going on. And when we talk about a holistic approach to health, people think that I'm a goofball. But if you don't think that there are mental, emotional, and perhaps even spiritual reasons for why you're doing things, you're missing it. You're missing an
mhm.
opportunity here to really do some really deep healing. And I'm so glad that you found your way in the way that you did. And I also want to say it's not going to work the same way for everybody. So
Right.
if somebody is listening in and they're hearing your story and they're like, gosh, I'm so inspired. Maybe I want to make some change, or I know that I'm doing this. And perhaps they shut the episode down as soon as they heard the word bulimia because it was too confronting. And that's okay. It may not be the right time.
Mhm.
But whenever a person is starting to invite in the possibility of, let's say, stopping smoking, or in this case, fixing their disordered eating, what would you suggest to somebody? Like, where is maybe what is the first step that somebody might take in order to start to be nudged onto the path that might lead to lasting vitality, physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, etc.?
I think the first step needs to be the, sharing with
Mm,
your loved one,
yeah,
or with a loved one, or whoever feels like they would be the most supportive. Um, because that alone, because it is a very, even when I was anorexic, it was like if somebody says, "Oh no," if they're worried about me, "Oh, you're looking too skinny." It was like, "Yes." Like it was like
oh
a
yeah,
fuel the fire. But
yeah,
if you start, when I started putting weight on, if someone said like, "Wow, you're looking really healthy." I was like, I'm fat. Like you instantly have these like, oh, healthy means I'm getting fat now. And
Yeah,
so it's like
yeah,
there's
yeah,
there's no winning with that. Like, so what I can say about this too is if you know somebody who clearly suffers from an eating disorder, commenting on the weight is never
yeah.
a good thing. And especially as they start to get healthy,
Mm,
it's better to just not even acknowledge
right.
anything about the weight. Um, but as far as like for anyone who is struggling, the sharing, admitting, it's the acknowledging, because
Yeah,
but saying it out loud to somebody else is huge. And that alone will bring a lot of healing, a lot of breakthrough, and also gives you an opportunity to have somebody, if you want. I'm a person who likes to be held accountable. I like that. I like
yeah,
holding Kyle accountable, and I
right.
like him holding me accountable. He doesn't ask me to hold him accountable. I just do because that's what a good wife does, right?
He appreciates it. He has told me that. He's told me
Yeah.
about your
No, he's told
accountability.
me. Well, he'll say like, "Oh, I'm not gonna, blah blah blah," and then if I see him, I'm like, "Hey, I thought you said you weren't gonna blah blah blah."
Hey, Buster, quit blah blah blahing.
um, and then it's the journaling was really helpful. I think really trying to find the thing, find the area, or pinpoint when it started. Pinpoint when those thoughts started coming in, and then just kind of like starting to do some journaling about that time in your life, what was going on, what was the thing that made you need this sense of control, because
Yeah,
it's a control thing.
yeah,
Um, but it is different for everybody. So, like me sharing my story and what I've done to heal from it, some people might need to go even further and see a professional.
yeah,
Seek out somebody like yourself who knows about a woman's, health, and really just anyone, man or woman's health. But if it's women we're talking to, that was also a big thing that I started thinking about after reading How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy was what damage have I done
mm,
internally to
mm,
myself? Because, there's a long list of things that they say from bulimia or anorexia, what those things can cause. And I was nervous that I wasn't going to be able to have children after dealing with those things for so long. Um, and if someone's partner isn't the person that they, would talk to, there's best friends, there's mom, there's, but like seeking out someone to share, and that's the hardest part.
yeah, yeah,
You have to want it. You have to want to stop, because otherwise you won't. It has to be
yeah,
when the person is ready. Um,
mm,
and then, yeah, like I said, journaling, um, finding that little, origin seed when that was planted. And then just intentionally, it's going to feel exhausting. It was exhausting for a long time, having to rewire my thinking around food,
yeah,
how I felt after eating food, taking control of my thoughts if I did decide to eat something bad, and not allowing myself to spiral and hate myself. Like it was a process,
yeah,
and
yeah.
um but very much worth it.
Yeah, and I'll add as like a final thing to that list that remember the goal here is not perfection. None of us are perfect. For people who think they're perfect, they're like imperfectly perfect. There is like the 80-20 rule. There's this is really a matter of reclaiming your health and what this really means from a women's health perspective, a fertility perspective, a longevity perspective, a performance perspective. There's so many reasons. Find a good reason for you. Find somebody who's supportive. And remember, the goal is not to be perfect. In fact, I
Mhm.
would even venture to say, given what you told me, that you're not completely out of the weeds. You know, this is a bit of a part of the hardwiring that you've had to undo, and it's still an ongoing conversation with yourself. And I think it is very helpful to have people like Kyle in your life who are, um, you know, they're you love them in such a way, you have a relationship in such a way where they can hold space for this process, because it's just another process. It's
Mhm.
a work in process. So I appreciate you sharing so much. I know this is a very vulnerable topic, and I am so delighted that I have a person in my life like you who's willing to come on and talk about this, because it is coming up quite a bit in my practice now and amongst some friends and family. And I got to say, I don't know if there's a ton of resources out there that's like a one size fits all. So hopefully somebody's able to take some gems, some nuggets from this conversation, and maybe even 10 years later, when they do decide to make the change, they can go back to it and listen with fresh ears and maybe a more open heart. Anything you want to add, Tosh? This has been a really
Um,
nice conversation.
yeah, I think also, if there are children, if there anyone's suffering from this that has children, that use that as motivation,
Oh,
if
yeah.
for nothing else, to get healthy, because our children are watching us. They're watching our habits, they're watching our relationship with food, they're watching um, everything.
Yeah.
And, I that was a huge call to action for me too, was like wanting to have children, but knowing like I don't want to be doing this. I don't want
Yeah.
to be like this
Yeah.
when I have children. So like, and that was even before, that was like literally right before Bear was born. That
Mm.
like, not right before, but I maybe like in that year before.
Wow.
So kind of right before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, or no, maybe a little bit before that. I don't know the timing. I'm on a cleanse right now. I can't remember my dates.
I can't be
I'm a
held
little
accountable
foggy.
for what I say.
I just know that like I had been I was super healthy. I remember when I got pregnant with him. And I remember thinking when I was pregnant with him, like, I'm so happy that I can eat
Yeah.
food and grow this baby without feeling terrified about my body. Like, I loved my pregnant body. I
Mm.
loved when like gaining weight, like it wasn't an issue. And I could only imagine how terrifying that would have been, um, had I still been in, just that type of a mindset. But I think, we talk, you hear the breaking the generational curses, and, there's
Yeah.
lots of different language that has that same effect. But it's real. It really is
Yeah.
real. So, like, my mom dealt with anorexia. I dealt with anorexia. My children will not.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like that ends here. That ended here. And um, that to me is the most important thing, is that my daughter, my son, like they are growing up with a healthy relationship with food. Like I'm not the, like ruling with an iron fist. We were just at a birthday party and she served crappy pizza and crappy store-bought cake, and both of them had it. Like
Yeah.
I am not, when we're at a birthday party, enjoy the birthday party. I'm not
Yeah.
going to be that mom who's like, you can never eat these things ever, gluten, guilt trip them or anything. Like, you save these things for a special occasion every now and then.
Yeah.
And then listen to see how your body feels later. Like, just notice anything, if anything feels different, if whatever. So, just that alone, for anybody that might have children, like, do it for yourself, obviously, but also do it for your children or your future children.
Yeah.
Like, it matters. And
Mm.
it is possible. Healing, full recovery, healing from it is possible. I can attest to that. And it's miserable being in that place. I can remember everything that I felt, everything that I went through, and the exhaustion of it. It's so exhausting. Um,
Mm.
but full healing, full recovery
Yeah.
is definitely possible.
Thank you so much, Miss Kingsbury. I didn't know your maiden name was it Wick or Wicks?
Wicks.
Wix. Well, I appreciate you so much coming on to the show again, and we'll send people your way if they have questions. I'm sure you'd be open to pointing them in the right direction if they had anything specific. So thank you again, and I'll be seeing you soon in Austin.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan. Love you.
Love you.